At family dinner, the air was thick with the smell of roasted garlic and unspoken judgment. My sister, Selina, leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass with a practiced ease that made my stomach turn. She smiled, looking around the table to ensure she had everyone's attention before delivering the line she'd been saving all night. "You'll never own property, Aurora," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Honestly, it's probably for the best. Some people just aren't built for that kind of responsibility." My father, sitting at the head of the table, nodded in agreement, not even looking up from his steak. "She's right," he grunted. "Stick to renting forever. It's safer for someone like you." The table went silent. My mother paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. Everyone watched me, waiting for the embarrassment to land. They were waiting for the crack in my voice, the burn of tears in my eyes, or a defensive outburst they could dismiss as jealousy. I gave them neither. I just breathed in slowly, the scent of the expensive wine they were drinking, wine I had likely paid for indirectly, filling my senses. I set my fork down with a deliberate, soft clink against the china. "You're probably right," I said calmly. The tension in the room evaporated instantly. They relaxed, thinking the moment was over, satisfied that I had accepted my place at the bottom of the hierarchy. But while they went back to their meal, something sharper settled inside me. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. Because the next morning, before anyone in that house woke up to their perfect lives, I made a single call. One phone call that would rewrite the entire story they thought they controlled. Before I tell you what happened when the sun came up, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? I want to know I'm not the only one who has sat at a table full of family and felt completely alone. And when you hear what I did next, tell me, would you have done the same? My name is Aurora, and in my family, silence wasn't peace. It was simply the sound of someone else winning. But they forgot that silence is also where you build the things that can destroy them. For as long as I can remember, my family has measured success by very specific metrics: square footage, mortgage rates, and how loudly someone could brag about renovations over dinner. In our house, you were only as valuable as the property deed with your name on it. I grew up learning to take up as little space as possible in conversations that never seemed meant for me. Selina was always the shining star. She was the golden child, the straight A student, the one with the perfect resume and the social calendar to match. When she bought her first house in her late 20s, my parents treated it like a family trophy. They polished that achievement at every gathering, showing photos of her entryway or her garden to distant relatives, beaming with pride they never tried to hide. "Selina is building a legacy," my mother would say, squeezing my sister's hand. And me? I never corrected their assumptions. Why would I? They had already written the script, and I was just a supporting character. To them, I was the daughter who liked renting. I was the one who wasn't built for the stress of ownership, the quiet child who must have been struggling financially but was too polite to admit it. They never asked about my work beyond a half-interested, "How's that consulting thing going?" whenever they felt obligated to include me. They didn't know it wasn't just consulting. They didn't know my days were filled with acquisitions, tenant screening, renovation budgeting, and cash flow projections. They had no idea that while they were praising Selina for buying throw pillows, I was negotiating deals on multi-unit complexes. I didn't hide my success out of fear. I hid it because, in my family, applause was a finite resource, always reserved for the loudest person in the room. I had no interest in performing for an audience that had already decided I was a failure. I watched them underestimate me for decades. I watched them mistake my silence for weakness and my privacy for poverty. They thought I was surviving on scraps, unaware that I was the one setting the table. But keeping two lives separate, the one they saw and the one I lived, was exhausting. And eventually, The lines between their perception and my reality were bound to blur. It started 2 years ago, on a cold night in late fall. 2 years ago, on a bitter night in late November, the dynamic in our family shifted, though nobody knew it but me. My phone rang just past midnight. When I saw Selena's name lighting up the dark room, my stomach tightened. We weren't the kind of sisters who had late-night chats. Calls at this hour usually meant drama, and I was right. Her voice was shaking so hard I could barely understand her at first. She wasn't the polished, arrogant woman from the dinner table. She sounded small, terrified. "I lost it, Aurora," she whispered, her breath hitching. "I lost the job. They let me go this afternoon." I sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. "Okay, take a breath. You have savings, right? You can float for a while until—" "I don't," she cut in, the panic rising. "I don't have anything. The renovations, the car payments, the trips. I'm over-leveraged. My mortgage is due in 3 days, and if I miss it, the bank sends a notice. Mom and Dad will find out." There it was, the real fear. It wasn't about being homeless, it was about the mask slipping. She was terrified that the golden image our parents worshipped would finally crack. "Please," she begged, and I heard actual tears. "Don't tell them. They can't know I failed. I just need a bridge. I'll pay you back as soon as I'm on my feet. Just cover the mortgage. It's $3,000. $3,000 a month. It was a staggering amount to ask for, but in that moment she wasn't the golden child. She was just my sister, scared of falling off the pedestal everyone else had built for her. So, I did what I had always done. I fixed it. "I'll wire it tomorrow," I said softly. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Just 1 month, I promise." But 1 month turned into 3, then 6. She eventually found a new job, but the salary was significantly lower than her previous one. Instead of downsizing, she clung to the lifestyle she couldn't afford. The house, the upgrades, the image. It all depended on money she didn't have, and a pride she refused to let go of. By the end of the first year, the payments had become automatic, withdrawn quietly from my business account every month, unnoticed by anyone but me. I had become her silent investor, funding the very success she used to belittle me. While Selena was frantically trying to patch the holes in her sinking ship with my money, I was quietly building a fleet of my own. My parents assumed my silence meant stagnation. They looked at my modest 1-bedroom apartment, my 5-year-old car, and my lack of designer clothes, and they saw failure. They saw a woman who couldn't keep up. What they didn't see was the dashboard on my laptop. While I was wiring $3,000 a month to keep Selena's facade alive, I was aggressively expanding my portfolio. I bought a duplex near the river when the market dipped. I secured a triplex downtown that needed work. Work I managed myself on weekends. I acquired a row of single-family homes in steady blue-collar neighborhoods where retention was high and vacancies were low. By the time of that dinner, I owned 17 properties, 17 doors. Each one was quietly paying for itself, generating a cash flow that far exceeded the salary of the consulting gig my parents thought I had. I lived simply not because I had to, but because I understood the difference between being rich and looking rich. I understood that real wealth is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention. It compounds in the background. I managed everything myself: acquisitions, tenant screening, renovation budgeting. I knew the price of lumber, the cap rates of the local market, and the exact legal language needed for an eviction notice. I had built an empire in the shadows, fueled by the very discipline my family claimed I lacked. The hypocrisy of it all usually rolled off my back. I would watch my parents praise Selena for buying a new sectional sofa on credit, while I was closing on a commercial unit. I would listen to them worry about my instability, knowing I could buy their house in cash if I wanted to. but silence has a limit. Last night, listening to Selena mock me, watching her bask in the glow of a success that I was literally paying for, something inside me finally snapped. I realized I hadn't just been helping her survive, I had been enabling a lie. Had allowed her to shine while I stood behind the curtain, holding up the set pieces, dressed in black so no one would see me. That ended now. My empire was real. Her kingdom was alone, and I was about to call it in. The morning after that dinner felt eerily quiet. It was the kind of heavy, expectant silence that settles over a city right before a storm breaks. I woke up early, made coffee, and opened the blinds of my small apartment. The cold light spilled across the hardwood floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, I just stood there breathing, letting the memory of last night replay in sharp, humiliating flashes. I saw Selena's laugh again. I saw my father's nod of approval when she mocked me. I felt the collective gaze of the table, checking my face for cracks, waiting for the poor renter to crumble. My phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the stillness. I picked it up, and Selena's name lit up the screen. I expected an apology, maybe a text saying she'd had too much wine or that she didn't mean to be so harsh. Instead, it was a photo. It was a picture of her kitchen, gleaming with a brand new, intricate tile backsplash. Underneath, a message bubble popped up. Thinking about upgrading the master bathroom next. Contractors quoted me $15K. Might as well keep building equity, totally worth it. Equity. The word hit me harder than the insult at dinner. It punched the air out of my lungs. She was talking about equity, about ownership and value, using money that wasn't hers. Money I had been quietly transferring every single month for 2 years. She wasn't just surviving, she was upgrading. She was polishing a life built on a crumbling foundation that I was holding up with my bare hands. I stared at the photo of the gleaming tile, imagining the warm under-cabinet lights I knew she'd installed last month. I felt a realization settle over me like cold steel. I hadn't just helped a struggling sister. I had funded an illusion. I had allowed her to perform this role of the successful homeowner while I played the part of the failure, all while my bank account bled to keep her secret safe. She wasn't grateful. She was entitled. And that text message? That casual, bragging text about bathroom renovations while I sat in the apartment she mocked? That was the moment the bridge finally burned. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't type out a furious paragraph reminding her who actually paid for that backsplash. Anger is messy, and I needed to be precise. I sat down at my small kitchen table, the wood cool under my palms, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the dashboard for my real estate portfolio. The screen filled with rows of data, my reality. 17 properties, occupancy rates holding steady at 98%, rental income climbing, months of renovations, late-night planning sessions, and strict budgeting had brought me here. It was a picture of quiet success, quiet control, quiet power. I scrolled through the numbers, seeing the stark contrast between my life and hers. I had spent years living beneath my means, driving an old car and wearing simple clothes, while Selena lived far above hers. And somehow, the world, and my parents, believed she was the responsible one. The hypocrisy stung, but not as much as my own complicity. I had let it happen. I had signed the checks that bought her the applause. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Selena. Bathroom reno might be pricey, but it adds value. You should look into buying something small one day, Aurora. It's a good investment. That was it. The final patronizing pat on the head. I closed the text thread and tapped the contact for Janet, my property manager and financial assistant. She answered on the second ring, her voice professional and warm. Morning, Aurora. What's up? I need to make a change to the outgoing accounts, I said. My voice didn't shake. It was flat, even, and final. The monthly transfer to Selena's mortgage account. Cancel it. There was a brief pause on the line. Janet knew the arrangement. She knew I'd been covering it for 2 years. Cancel it completely? Or just pause it? Cancel it, I said. Effective immediately. No more transfers. Stop the payments. Understood, Janet said, sensing the shift in my tone. I'll update the ledger and stop the auto draft today. Thank you, Janet. When the call ended, I kept my hands on the table, letting the stillness settle back over the room. The decision felt like an anchor dropping. Heavy, irrevocable, but necessary. 2 years of secrecy were over. I didn't know exactly how the fallout would look, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Selena was about to feel the ground shift beneath her feet, and this time, I wouldn't be there to catch her. Selena didn't notice the missing payment right away. That was the luxury of her life. She was used to things operating smoothly, invisible safety nets catching her before she even realized she was falling. She assumed the money would appear simply because she needed it to. But 3 days later, just past noon, my phone lit up with her name. I was reviewing a lease agreement for a new tenant when the buzzing started. I didn't need to answer to know what the call was about, but I let it ring twice before picking up. Aurora? Her voice trembled slightly, a crack in the porcelain facade. Hey, something weird happened with my mortgage account. The transfer didn't go through this morning. Did your bank glitch or something? I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the ceiling. The silence that stretched between us was heavy, deliberate. No, I said calmly. There wasn't a glitch. A sharp inhale on the other end. Okay. So, is it delayed? Should I expect it tonight? The bank sends the late notice tomorrow, and I really don't want to deal with that stress. It's not delayed, Selena. It's not coming. The quiet on the other end wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of panic trapped in a thin shell of pride. What do you mean it's not coming? She whispered, her voice rising an octave. I've supported you for 2 years, I said, my tone even, devoid of the emotion she wanted to provoke. 24 months of payments. That ends now. Her composure shattered. You can't do this. I can't afford the full mortgage right now, you know that. I told you I just needed a little more time until the promotion comes through. You said that a year ago, I replied. And yesterday you were texting me about installing a $15,000 bathroom. You don't need time, Selena. You need a reality check. So what? You're punishing me? She snapped, fear turning into aggression. Because of what I said at dinner? You're being dramatic. I didn't mean it like that. You're going to let me lose my house over a joke? I'm letting you handle your own investments, I said. You wanted to talk about equity? Now you have to pay for it. She began pleading then. Fast, messy promises to cut spending, to pay me back someday. It was a script I'd heard a dozen times. I'm done keeping you afloat while you pretend you're standing on your own, I said, and hung up. 2 hours later, a text appeared on my screen, glowing like a threat. I'm calling a family meeting tonight. Mom and Dad need to know you're sabotaging me. The living room felt smaller than usual when I walked in that night. The air was pressurized, as if the walls themselves were bracing for impact. My mother sat on the beige sofa, wringing her hands in her lap. My father stood near the window, stiff-backed, his jaw set tight in that familiar look of disappointment. Uncle Mason hovered by the doorway, looking like he wanted a front-row seat to the execution, and Selena. She stood in the center of the room, eyes red-rimmed, makeup strategically smudged to look fragile. She didn't wait for me to sit. Tell them, she said, her voice thin and accusing. Mom frowned, looking between us. Tell us what? Selena swallowed hard, performing the moment perfectly. I can't afford my house payments. I haven't been able to for 2 years. A stunned silence filled the room. Then Mason coughed awkwardly. 2 years? Aurora has been helping me, Selena whispered, refusing to look at me. Dad straightened up, confusion wrinkling his forehead. Helping you how? She's been paying my mortgage. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Dad stared at Selena like she had just confessed to arson. 3,000 a month? He muttered. Every month? Yes, Selena wept, but she stopped. She cut me off today, and now I'm going to lose everything. The room turned to me. I saw the shift in their eyes, from shock to judgment. Aurora, Dad said, his voice finding its footing. Why would you stop? You know how important that house is to your sister. And honestly, how could you even afford to help in the first place? You rent. You barely manage your own life. Barely manage. The phrase hung in the air. Is that what you think? I asked softly. That I barely manage? We know you struggle, honey, Mom added, trying to soften the blow. But to promise your sister help and then abandon her. I didn't argue. I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim black folder. Inside was the summary Janet had prepared, not just bank transfers to Selena, but the full picture. I laid it gently on the coffee table and slid it toward my father. You might want to look at the math before you finish that sentence. Dad hesitated, then picked it up. As he scanned the first page, the transformation on his face was cinematic. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then a stunned, frozen stillness. He looked at Mom, then back at the paper. 17 properties, he whispered. Mom leaned in. What? Rental income? Market value? Dad's voice trailed off, his eyes wide. Uncle Mason stepped closer, peering over the edge. Good Lord, this says her portfolio is worth over $4 million. Dad lowered the paper slowly, looking at me as if I were a stranger who had just walked into his house. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the sound of a hierarchy collapsing. It's accurate, I said simply. I've been managing my own empire for years. While you were worried about me renting, I was buying the neighborhood. The silence in the room was heavy, but for the first time, it wasn't suffocating. It was the kind of quiet that follows a massive structural failure, the dust settling after the building has already collapsed. Selena couldn't look at anyone. She sat on the arm of the sofa, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. You never said anything, Mom whispered, her eyes darting between me and the financial summary. You let us think. I let you think what you wanted to think, I corrected gently. And I didn't correct you, because I knew the moment I did, the dynamic would change. But it had to change. Selena finally raised her head. Her mascara was smeared, stripping away the polished perfection she guarded so fiercely. I didn't want anyone to know I was struggling, she choked out. I couldn't handle the idea of being less, so I let Aurora help me, and I told myself it was temporary. But then the roof needed fixing, and the market shifted, and I couldn't stop pretending. You didn't fail because you needed help, Selena, I said, my voice steady. You failed because you hid it. You prioritized the image of success over the reality of solvency, and you treated your safety net, me, like a doormat. Dad stepped forward, looking older than he had 10 minutes ago. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sobering realization that he had bet on the wrong horse for 30 years. Aurora, he said quietly, we owe you an apology, a real one. I know, I said, but apologies don't pay mortgages. Truth does. I turned to Selena. You have 30 days. Sell the house, refinance, or downsize. But the Bank of Aurora is closed. It's time to live the life you can actually afford. The next month was a blur of reality checks. Selena put the house on the market. There were no more bragging texts, no more renovation photos. When I helped her pack, it wasn't with money, but with labor. Taping boxes and moving furniture. Standing in her emptying living room, she looked around at the space she couldn't keep. I thought selling meant I failed, she admitted quietly. It's not failure, I told her. It's alignment. Your expenses match your income now. That's what actual stability feels like. She nodded, wiping her eyes. For the first time, she looked like my sister, not my rival. Life after the truth came out was quieter, but it was an honest quiet. Selena moved into a modest condo downtown. It didn't have a chef's kitchen or a sprawling backyard to brag about on Instagram, but it had something better: peace. There were no crushing payments keeping her awake at night, no secrets to juggle, and no desperate calls to me begging for a bridge loan. My parents changed too. The dynamic at Sunday dinners shifted. Dad stopped making jokes about renting. In fact, last week, he pulled me aside to ask for my opinion on refinancing their retirement cabin. Mom started sending me articles about real estate trends, not to lecture me, but because she finally respected that I knew more than she did. The pedestal they had built for Selena was dismantled, brick by brick, and with it went the pressure for her to perform, and the pressure for me to shrink. As for me, I felt lighter. I realized that for years I had been carrying the weight of their expectations, the expectation to be small, to be the helper, to be invisible. By revealing my success, I hadn't just exposed Selena. I had reclaimed my own narrative. I still live simply. I still drive my 5-year-old car. But now, when I walk into a room, I don't feel the need to explain myself. My worth isn't in what I say. It's in what I've built. I learned that boundaries aren't walls intended to shut people out. They are protections intended to show people how to respect you. My family sees me differently now, not just because I have money, but because I finally stopped apologizing for who I am. Peace feels different when it isn't bought with silence. It feels solid. It feels like equity, the kind that no one can take away. If you've ever been the one underestimated by the people who are supposed to know you best, remember this: you don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes you just need to show them the receipts. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to hide your success to keep the peace? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones finally speak up.